All right, so I want to kind of follow Pastor Rogers' lead in how he's teaching on Friday nights. I think it's a really good format, and I wanted to kind of keep the same pattern. So our words for tonight, and it's going to be included a little later in the Torah portion, is the words Tsvah or Hasobeyot. Okay, so Tsvah or Hasobeyot. If you're a Strong's Concordance person, I think this is 6683 if you want to look it up. Same word. Okay? So the definition basically, or the root would be Tsvah. It means to wage war or to serve. So to wage war or to serve. So we'll get to that towards the end. I'm going to save that part for the last part. So the Hebrew word Tsvah primarily refers to an organized group of soldiers or a host that is prepared for battle. It can also denote the concept of warfare or military service. So this is directly out of the Strong Concordance when I looked it up. So I wanted to give it the exact information so you can have it there to see as well. In a broader sense, Tsvah is used to describe the heavenly hosts, including the angels and the service or duties performed by them. And then the other one you probably are familiar with. How many of you have heard the term Yahweh or Adonai Sabaoth, the Lord of hosts? Okay, so that word, if you notice, Sabaoth is in there. All right? So 3 points for tonight. These are the things we're going to cover tonight. I'm going to compare and contrast the construction of the golden calf. Yeah, that's fine. Construction of the golden calf versus the tabernacle, okay, which is what we talk about in this portion versus what happened a few chapters before when it's tied together. Part of the reason why I want to do this is usually when I teach from the Torah, I tend to look at application, looking at what God instructs and how the people respond to it. The pattern never changes. I think there's a lot to be learned from this particular portion because you're going to see an attitude shift in the people from what happened several chapters before. And I think this is applicable to us today because we are not perfect. Okay, we serve a holy God who it desires for us to be perfect, but we still suffer in this flesh the tendency to want to wander away. Okay, and we struggle with that. So we're going to address that tonight, but we're going to also see both God's favor, but also his judgment, and that he's very fair in that, all right? We're going to talk a little bit about the pillars of the tabernacle and how it relates to the body and the congregation today as a living tabernacle. And the final part we're going to talk about are the women who served at the entrance of the tent of meeting. All right. So here we go. So stay there for me a second, Betty Jean. We'll stay on that one. So I first want you to go to Exodus 25 for a second. Okay, so we're going to go a couple of chapters, about 10 chapters before, to get a little bit of context here. All right. Okay. So this is a little bit after the Mount Sinai experience, the Ten Commandments being spoken, and God is now beginning to reveal to Moses the plans for the building of the tabernacle. All right, so as we read through this, what I want you to keep in mind is God's intent was to reveal to Moses, and then for Moses to reveal to the children of Israel his plans. Okay, all of this was already in God's mind. He had everything planned out. He had everything thought out. He's inviting the elders to come up. He then invites Moses up to the mountaintop to give the instructions. Okay? All right. So let's do this. I want you to go to Exodus 25 and verse 9 and follow along with me there for a second. Okay, so it says here that Moses went up with Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and 70 elders of the children of Israel, and they saw the God of Israel, and there under his feet, as paved work of sapphire stone, and it was like the very heavens in its clarity. But on the nobles of the children of Israel, he did not lay his hand, so they saw God's face, and they ate and they drank in his presence. Okay? Let's continue. Verse 12. And then the Lord said to Moses, come up to me onto the mountain and be there. Now that's interesting. So I wonder how that's translated into the Hebrew. He's inviting him up, and he's basically to come up and stay here with me. And I will give you tablets of stone and the law and commandments which I have written, that you may teach them. So Moses went up with his assistant Joshua, and Moses went up to the mountain of God. Mark this down. This is where I want you to focus on for a second. Verse 14. And he said to the elders, what? Wait. Wait here until we come back. Indeed, Aaron and Hur are with you. If any man has difficulty, let them go to them. So, here you have all of the elders sitting on a portion of the mountain, eating and drinking before the Lord. God says to Moses, come up with me. And then Moses tells Aaron and Hur to do what? Stay here, don't go anywhere. Okay? When was the last time God had his presence manifested where he talked to a man face to face? The last, prior to this, when did God have that face-to-face contact with somebody on a continual basis? He had a little bit with Abraham. There were certain times that he did. In the garden. Okay, so what I want you to think about right here is God is preparing with Moses an opportunity that he's going to extend to the nation of Israel and say, come and build my house so that I can dwell with you. The last time God dwelt in the earth was in the garden. How important was this for God? Extremely important. Okay, and he's inviting now, it's not something he's doing by himself. He's inviting the children of Israel to do this together with him. It's a beautiful picture, okay? So if we can kind of see how precious this is, you'll understand why God's desire is to have a holy habitation of where he can dwell. It's not just a worship aspect as well. It's his presence and his interaction. It's what he desires. So in that comes worship. It's a natural reaction that we have to do that, okay? All right, so let's go to the next slide. All right, so Exodus 24, yes, he invites Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu and the 70 elders to come up. They see the God of Israel, and they ate and drank before him on the mountain. God tells Moses to go up to the mountain in Exodus 25, gives him the 10 Commandments, and he also says something else. In verse 8 of chapter 25, all right, so in the first part of chapter 25, he tells Moses, speak to the children of Israel that they may do what? Bring me an offering. All right? From everyone who gives willingly with his heart, you shall take an offering. So the anticipation is here two things. One, they're going to offer, and how are they going to offer? Willingly. They're going to want to do this. All right? From everyone who gives it willingly, with his heart, you shall take an offering. And this is the offering you shall take. So then he's going to go through the specifics of each thing, which is going to sound very familiar when it comes to the building of the tabernacle. So again, this is just the instructions he's giving currently to Moses. Okay? And in verse 8 he says, let them make me a sanctuary, a mikdash, a holy place, that I may dwell among them, according to everything that I show you, that is, the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of its furnishings, so that you shall make it. Okay? So we're looking here at the reality that God is giving instructions to Moses, specifically to how he wants the tabernacle built. He wants that so that if it matches to what the instructions are there to a T, he's able to come down. Not one thing can be out of place. Okay? How many of you have had a home built from a manufacturer or your own home built with instruction? In other words, you didn't move into a pre-existing home. Okay. How many of you enjoyed going through the process of picking the sizes of the room, the cabinets, the sink, I'm sure the bathroom, all of those things that go into a house? You have in your mindset, you've got the floor plans, all right? And then you've got to trust somebody else to build that house. You have to trust the fact that the carpenters, the plumbers, the masons, everyone who's going to come in and work that house, and the roofers are going to build that house to specs. So that when you go through your walkthrough, everything looks great. Normally that doesn't happen. What usually happens when you build your home, there's a couple of things here and there you got to take note of, and they usually have to fix. Something's off. My wife and I were walking around our neighborhood the other day. One of our neighbors had their house painted, and it looked nice previously, and then they painted it a really nice color. Now it's even more beautiful. And then we noticed something about the windows. The upstairs windows were off a little bit. So the new paint basically showed a glaring error. And I would have thought, after painting the house and seeing that afterwards, I would have thought, oh my goodness, I have to go back and fix that. All right, but this is God basically setting the floor plans to build his habitation so he can dwell in it. So that same idea is that expectation of wanting to move in. I'm sure he had that same, much more, obviously, a desire to not only dwell there just because he wanted to be there, but also to be with his people. All right, let's go to chapter 31 for a second. So we're in Exodus 31. All right, so I would like for someone to read, no matter what translation you have, I want you to read chapter 31, verses 1 through 5. Who's got it? This is chapter 31 of Exodus. You can read verses 1 through 5.
Then the Lord said to Moses, "See, I have chosen Bezalel, son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, and I have filled him with the Spirit of God, with wisdom, with understanding, with knowledge, and with all kinds of skills, to make artistic designs for work in gold, silver, and bronze, to cut and to set stones, to work in wood, and to engage in all kinds of crafts."
Okay. What's special about this? Spirit of God was going to move in these individuals. Did they know they were going to do this yet? No. God already knew who he wanted. He was already looking, and not only that, he placed in these individuals the gifts and talents, and it also says that they chose others who would come with them that were given that gift to do this. Why is that important? For a congregation, God calls you to a place of worship and to fit together for a purpose to serve him in his kingdom. Whether you know your gifts and talents yet or not, if you wait a little bit, he's going to reveal them. You're not here by mistake. There's a reason why you're here. If you believe you're here by faith and he's called you, and the Spirit has given you those gifts, great or small, it doesn't matter. It's to serve him. Okay, now in their case, it was a pretty special one. I'll admit that. I mean, to have the ability to build the actual items that were going to be placed in the tabernacle was special. It was unique. Not going to take away that as someone's given that opportunity. But the reality is there was others who worked with them behind the scenes. They all worked together. Everybody who was willing to give and willing to participate, the Lord allowed them to participate in some manner, shape, or form. Okay? And that's the heart that we need to see in ourselves too, that when we're called to a place, when we're called to a congregation, it might take a little bit of time to figure things out. That's okay. The key thing is to, what did Moses tell Aaron and her to do? Wait. Wait until the instructions are given. Okay? If you know he's called you to a place and you sit and you wait, then the next step is, when he's ready to call you to do something, he will. It might be a little thing. It might be a big thing. It might take 10 years. It may take 2 days. Wait. Okay? I mean, honestly, we have eternity. I mean, how much... if we think about it. Okay. So now that we kind of got that picture, what happened? I mean, what caused the nation of Israel and the people to slip here for a second? Well, it's human nature, okay? And I won't necessarily blame Satan on this. I would say this is simply human nature. We're impatient. Okay? Some of you think that I'm very patient. Come around. Talk to me sometimes about issues that I have sometimes. And I do have a slow fuse, but when things that I want to go a certain way don't happen, I get really irritated. Or in my job, if people aren't doing their job, and my family knows this, I want to go and do it my way. Because I know I can do it better. But what happens is if I do that, there's other dominoes that might fall that might cause problems for other people. So I have to be careful that although I might know what to do in the moment that I'm supposed to do it, I have people that are above me, and I need to go to them and say, hey, here are the things that are going on. What can we do about this? For me going rogue and then causing more problems. Okay, so it's human nature when we know something or we feel confident and confident in some things, we want to do that. But when we are under authority, we need to be very careful with that we go and do the things the right way. We might be right. Okay, we're going to see an example of that tonight in the Torah, that happened. But we have to have, if there's a chain of command, there's a line of communication. Make sure that communication's there so nothing goes awry and you have more problems to clean up afterwards. All right, so let's go to 32, Exodus 32. All right, we know this well, but I'm going to highlight a couple of things here. So you can go to the next slide, Benny G. And keep going, next one. Just it'll fill in here a second. And one more. Yeah, it'll show the calf here a second. All right. So now, this is chapter 32, verse 1. Now, when the people saw that Moses delayed coming down from the mountain, the people gathered together to Aaron and said to him, "Come, make us gods that shall go before us, as Moses did. For this man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him." And Aaron said to them, "Wait, don't do..." No, what did he say? Some of your translations say take off. Some of them say break, tear off. Okay, so it says break off the golden earrings which are in the ears of your wives and your sons and your daughters. This does not sound pleasant. This sounds like almost desperation. Just get everything you can and build it. What should have been Moses' response, what should have been Aaron's response when the people came to him? Wait. Right? Who else should have said something? Her. And not the pronoun her. H-U-R. You know, the one who also helped Moses raise his hands up? Yeah, you don't see her in here. Her was probably like, I'm out. You do whatever you want, Aaron. That's your brother Moses. I have no idea. All right? He should have said something. All right, now the Bible's silent on that, but the instruction was to Moses to Aaron and to her, right? Not only that, it was also to the 70 elders. They knew, they should have. Where have you seen this situation play out before and later that the people that were told to wait honored it? David was one. I'm thinking earlier than David, before Moses. Abraham. All right, so this is back in Genesis 22. God tells Abraham that he wants his son to be sacrificed. So Abraham in chapter 22 gathers up his belongings and takes not only Isaac, but 2 servants with him. And they go up for a period of time, and he tells the servants, wait here because we're coming back. So either Abraham knew prophetically God was going to do something and rescue him, or he was just being obedient and making a statement of faith that they were both going to come back. And did the servants wait? Yes, they did. They waited until they both came back, and they all went to Beersheba from there, and they set up their camp there from there. All right? They could have just sat there and said, what in the world are they doing? Why are they going up there? You know, how there was no time frame either. That's the other thing here. Moses did not give Aaron and her a time frame. Abraham did not give his 2 servants a time frame. All that he simply said was, wait. Psalm 40, I waited patiently for the Lord, and he heard my cry. What does it require for us? Waiting. Okay? Now, in Acts 2, what did Jesus tell the disciples? Wait in Jerusalem. Did he tell them for how long? No. But he just said, wait until you receive the promise of your Father. So when the Lord gives a command and he tells us to wait, there's a reason why. He's getting things ready. He's got things already in mind. We see this already in the previous Torah portion. He was telling Moses, this is what I'm planning to do. While he's getting all the instructions, the people went, he's taking too long. You know, where did he go? I have no idea where he went. Do you know where he went? Aaron, I got an idea. Why don't we do this? It's not only that bad, but when Moses comes down and complains and said, why did you do this? What was Aaron's response? I don't know. I just took the gold, I threw it in there, and man, this calf came right out of the oven. Okay, now we laugh at that, but how many times when we get caught, when we know we're wrong, we're like, oh, it's not my fault, it's that person's fault. I was doing this, why are you blaming me? We naturally go into that mind frame because we're very defensive. Okay, I'm guilty of that, we're all guilty of that. It's human nature. So the reality is we have to own up to our sin, to the fault that we have caused, understand that this is a process of learning, ask for forgiveness, and move from that. Don't go back to it, okay? Because we're being prepared for a kingdom that God wants to hand over to us, right? To this whole entire creation. He has an order, he has a place to everything, and in order to do that, we have to be able to handle something so that he can say, okay, Fellowship Church, I need you to do this. We're good? Okay, I'm going to walk away. It might be for 100 years, it might be for 500 years, it might be for 1,000,000 years, but I'm going to trust that you're going to do it exactly the way that I tell you. Okay, for those of you that have been in the military or any type of job that requires a lot of regimentation, you know that when a senior officer or somebody tells you something, they're trusting, you're repeating the command back to them, and then when that higher official walks away, that the job's going to get done exactly the way it should be. Okay, there has to be that ability to trust, and that's what's being worked out here. All right, go to the next slide. Okay, now, what's beautiful about this picture, in contrast to the golden calf, is the presence of God. See, the people wanted to build what they wanted. Was there anything that came out of the sky? Was there a pillar of fire that came out of the sky? Was there peace? Was there anything that or even came close to this? No. What they had was rebellion. Okay, and because the teens are in here, I'll keep it PG. They weren't just kind of dancing joyfully around the calf. Okay, they were doing stuff they weren't supposed to. Okay, but when this came down, the reaction must have been just complete awe. You know the song we sing, I stand in awe of you? Probably speechless. Okay? Now, God is definitely in the position to give good gifts to us. We see that throughout Scripture, that he's the giver of good gifts, okay? Now, I do believe that's true, but I don't necessarily believe that he's giving the gifts to us for us to be gratified. Okay? Now, he gives as a good father gives, or a good parent gives, a good uncle gives, a good aunt gives, a good family member, a good friend. Whoever in your life has been a positive influence that just gives, and you know they're giving to you because they expect nothing in return, that's how God gives. He just does it. Okay? It's not for our gratification. But I do believe that this here is a gift. And not only was it was a gift because they could serve. They could come close to him. They could worship him. They could experience his presence, just like we do here. Okay? So when it comes to kingdom work, we have to be patient. Those of you that have been around long enough to remember your first interactions with individuals in Israel, how long ago was that? And this is before Ketamim. So 1990s, right? We had not met Daniela Weiss yet. We were still kind of just getting our feet wet with trying to figure out who was legitimate to meet with and who not to. Look how far fellowship has come in 30, 40 years in our relationships with the people of Israel. Okay? How many of you are following the congregation and everybody that's on Facebook? I love seeing the kids over there. You know, I think, who is it? Daniel Howell's youngest, the new baby? There's a picture of her being held by the bus driver. It's a cute, that little girl, I have yet to see her cry once. She's the happiest little girl I've ever seen. She's just all over the place. But I think that's the reality of what the Lord is allowing us to do for the next generation to go, that trust has been built, that the next generation is now standing up and they're enjoying the next generation. that our generation that was there first, that get to see everybody go, is now seeing a generation that's coming up that has life and love and connection and wants to do these things. And for those of you young folks who haven't gone yet, when your time comes, you're going to have that opportunity. You're going to see what it feels like, okay? And I know for them to see you coming is important too, because it's, oh, there's more of you. They're younger. They're joyful. Okay, and I think it's a beautiful thing. And I think that speaks to us here as a community here. When people come and see us here and we minister to people here, is important too. When we have our Seder, when we have the tabernacle tours, when we have our other events that are here, and the community comes in and they see a picture of the kingdom of God, it's a beautiful thing when they see old and young worshiping before the Lord and having a great time. And that's really what this is. That's what God wanted. He wants a family. Okay, he made a promise to Abraham. He confirmed it with Isaac. He's confirmed it with Jacob. It's an eternal covenant. It's there, and it's for the nation of Israel to enjoy, and we've been grafted in to be able to do that with them, and what a blessing that is, and because of that, the whole world's going to be blessed. Okay? But we have to wait and follow what he says. Okay? All right. I think we got that one down. I think I beat a dead horse on that enough. All right. Let's go to chapter. Go to the next slide. Okay. So here, now I'm one of the folks that has an opportunity to give the tours through the tabernacle. And when I saw this, it was really good for me to see this because there's so much to teach in the 45 minutes that we have to take people through the tour. I know Pastor has mentioned that there's a possibility that more folks may be able to do this year. He may be looking to add to the team to teach. I think anybody who has the opportunity that Pastor is going to ask to do this, it's a wonderful opportunity to really dig into just the details of the tabernacle. There is so much to teach on this. And I think the reality is as you go through each year, and even reading the Torah portion, there's just like one thing that stands out. Always. One new thing. All right. So what I wanted to do is to show you this picture. This is an artist's rendition of how the tabernacle would look like as it's being fitted together. Okay. So you see the poles that would run through to connect the posts, right? You see the rings that are on the outside of the posts where the posts would run through those. You see the silver sockets that are at the base where the boards are going to be fitted together. I mean, this was a process to put together. Okay. But there is such a beauty in the design and the color of it that if you go in to study it, it's quite detailed, but I'll spare that for tonight because there's a couple of things that I want to touch on, but it's so intricate and so beautiful. It speaks to so many things. All right. So what I want to do is let's go to chapter 36. So this is the second point. We're going to look at the fitting together of the boards. It must have been, acacia wood would not have been small trees. And more than likely at that time, they would have been plenty, especially in the wilderness where they were. I don't think it's the desert that it is today. I think it was more exactly what it was. It was wilderness. So if you think about the reality, all right, so sidebar for a second. You think of the reality of how many livestock Israel had in their possession. You had to have fields that these animals would have to eat from. Okay, they can't eat in the desert. Okay, so just a little bit of logic would tell you that if there's sheep and there's oxen, they're not meat eaters. They eat grass. So you had to have enough out there. So I'm quite sure what we see today is what the people would call the wilderness of what it looks like now was not back then. And we've known as empires have come in over generations, have wiped out many sections. You know, when the Romans came in, the Greeks came in, they had to get trees and materials, and you know how far deep into Africa many of these empires had to go down to get materials. The land was being decimated, as the empires moved in. So I don't think what we see now is exactly how it was, 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. I'm sure it was much more lively than it is today. All right, so 36:20 through 34. Let me get there. All right. So it says here, for the tabernacle, he made boards of acacia wood standing upright. The length of each board was 10 cubits, and the width of each board was a cubit and a half. So basically, you're looking at 2.5 feet in width, about 15 feet high. So a little bit bigger than what we have. Ours Ryan, 12 feet?
Yeah, it's 13, I think.
13 and a half?
Somewhere there.
So, okay, so close. So I know if we do a real size, the reason why we can't do real size is because hurricane code, it would basically not, it would be like a sail. Okay, so still it's almost the size, about 3/4 of the size of what we have would be comparable to this. So a little taller. Each board had 2 tenons for binding one to another. So the tenons are on the bottom. That's the silver plating that's on the bottom. That's where they're going to be joined together. All right, so they're joined in this way, and then they're joined in on the bottom. All right, so next year we got to have tenons, guys. I'm just kidding. You have to do that. And they're made out of pure silver, so we got to add that into the budget. Okay? Now, if you were to walk into the tabernacle and this was fitted together, it would look finished. It would look clean. In other words, you wouldn't see one line from the next. It was so fitted together that it looked like literally one piece. And there's a picture and a story that tells, which we're going to get to in a minute. So what specific tribe, or what specific, I shouldn't say what, all right, let's start with that. Which tribe was responsible for setting this up and taking it down? Levi. Which son of Levi? No. Yes, Merari. So if you go back and you study the 3 sons, there's Kohath, the sons of Kohath, the sons of Gershon, and the sons of Merari. Merari was the heavy-duty guys, the Arnold Schwarzeneggers of the group. Okay, they had to carry these things and put them on the oxen. All right, so let's go and now here's something interesting, and I do share this when I go through the tours with them, because I tie this into what Peter and Paul will say later in their writings, which we're going to get to in a second. All right, so go to Numbers chapter 4 with me a second. Numbers chapter 4. And I would like for somebody to read verses 29 through 32. So this is Numbers chapter 4, and you might have the title, The Ministry of Merari, on top of it. So chapter 4, 29 through 32. Don't be shy, whoever's got it.
As for the sons of Merari, you shall number them by their families and by their father's house, from 30 years old and above, even to 50 years old. You shall number them, everyone who enters the service to do the work of the tabernacle of meeting. And this is what they must carry as all their service for the tabernacle of meeting: the boards of the tabernacle, its bars, its pillars, its sockets, and the pillars around the court with their sockets, pegs, and cords, with all their furnishings and all their service. And you shall assign to each man by name the items he must carry.
Okay. What does verse 32 say? By name, they are responsible for their piece, their board, their bar, their socket. They were assigned a piece. No other son of Levi, in the instructions when it came to the construction and when they would take it down, has that instruction except for them. What if you were sleeping that day and you're late for work? What happens to the tabernacle if you don't show up? It doesn't get put together. Every piece counts. If you're missing, God can't show up. Okay? So, with that in mind, let's go see how this fits with the picture that God's picturing for us later on. All right, I want you to go to, if I got my scriptures here, hold on. 1 Peter, I think it's 1 Peter chapter 2. Yeah, I probably didn't write that. So 1 Peter chapter 2. 1 Peter chapter 2. You all know this scripture, but of course I want you to. All right. I need to get tabs. It's been a while. I need to practice. There we go. Okay. All right, so starting in verse 4, it says, coming to him as a living stone, rejected indeed by men, but chosen by God as precious. And you also as living stones are being built up into a spiritual household, a holy priesthood, to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable through God through Messiah Jesus. What are you? Living stones being fitted together to form into a holy habitation. So when Peter is speaking about this, he has this in mind. This is exactly his reference point. Okay? But he also makes an interesting observation here. He calls, and it also obviously goes back to the prophecy considering in Isaiah. But he says, behold, I lay in Zion a chief cornerstone. How many of you build and know what a cornerstone, or the importance of what is the importance of a cornerstone? Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. All right? So go ahead and go to the next picture, Betty Jean, for me, if you can. Okay. If you are in construction, you know that building a house or any building requires precision. Okay? It's literally one piece at a time has to fit together in a certain way, and if you don't build it a certain way, there's too much weight load on certain things, the entire house can collapse. Okay? So cornerstones, when they were used in ancient times, they were used to help build buildings. They were the first stone, they were perfect, they were without blemish, and the builders who build with this would start with that one rock or that one stone. And every single stone that was laid beyond that had to line up with that one. Okay? So let's talk about this for a second. All right? So, in relation to architecture, cornerstones are traditionally the first stone laid for a structure, with all the other stones laid in reference to it. It had to be perfect. All right? So that stone had to be perfect. So again, the other stones didn't necessarily have to be perfect, but this one did. The cornerstone marked the geographical location by orienting a building in a specific direction. This rock and all the weight that would rest upon it would rest and hold the entire structure. If we understand Peter's description here, he's telling us that what Isaiah was speaking of was that Jesus himself would be, when he places that chief cornerstone, he's going to give you the direction, the way things need to go, and everything rests on him. So when you're fitted in a congregation, it's because the Father knows he's lining you up with Jesus. And he's going to put you in the place where you need to be. He's going to orient you in the direction that you need to go in that congregation, and you can rest on that. Because he is my rock, my fortress, my strong tower, and he's the one that I trust in. So if you can rest on that, it's a beautiful picture. And the reality, I mean, how many different ways does God try to tell us how he's involved in everything and our role that he's calling us to be a part of? Okay? So I know there's a cornerstone here that we have that Pastor Ken put in. I don't think it's a really functional one. I think it was just for show, but it's right on, if you walk into the main entrance of Building 2, it's on the bottom right-hand side, you'll see that's a larger stone that's there. Is there one here too? Where? On the outside? Okay. Good to know. I didn't know that. So we got them there. And I think even though it's for show, I think it's the reality is it speaks to the reality of us being living stones being built up. All right, last point. Let's go to the last slide here a second. Okay, bronze laver. Let's go to Exodus 38. We're going to close with this one. I hopefully save the best for last. Give you a little bit of a cliffhanger here. Okay, so let me set the stage here for a second. We know that the scriptures sometimes are silent on topics we wish we could know more about. There are just statements in the Bible that you'll read, And you'll look at it and say, wait, did God just say that? And there's no other explanation beyond it. Okay, one of the ones that I always like to reference is when the children of Israel are in the desert, they all had to carry with them a spade. Because when they were in the wilderness, they didn't have bathrooms. So God told the nation of Israel, when you are in the camp, make sure you carry a spade with you, and when you need to go, you go outside of the camp. Because the Lord your God walks in your midst, and he wants to see no unclean thing among you. Okay? So the reality is that it was a practical thing, but also a spiritual thing. He didn't want to step in it. So be mindful of those things in our household. What are the things that maybe we're doing that we need to remove? And if we're faithful to do that, he will draw closer to us too, because we're, in a sense, drawing close to him. So this is one of those circumstances where the scripture just says something and it just leaves it. Okay? So I'm going to read it. I'm going to give some context to it. I'm going to give a little bit of an opinion on it, but I'm not going to let the opinion be the reality. I'm just going to give you some food for thought on this. All right? On the left is an actual bronze mirror. This is what the Egyptians probably had when the nation of Israel was leaving, and some of the things that they were allowed to, well, not even allowed, but the Egyptians were just throwing it at them to take things with them, would have been this. Okay? They did not have glass back then. So the bronze mirrors would have been very shiny, they would have been polished, and you would have been able to see your reflection. So the ladies more than likely had these, and they were walking around with them, and obviously, if you want to use a mirror for obvious different reasons, that's what they were there for. But I'm sure they were very beautiful. As much as this looks very old, it's pretty exquisite, for a mirror. I mean, how many of you would like to be walking around with that and not your compact mirror that you have? You pull that out and show around, and you're like, what's that? Oh, that's a bronze mirror. Where'd you get that? It was height of fashion in Egypt. All right, so Exodus 38, verse 8. All right, I'm going to have somebody read this for me. So just verse 8.
Moreover, he made the block of bronze, the base of bronze, and the mirrors of the serving women who served at the doorpost at the doorway of the tent of meeting.
Okay. Yeah, that's it. There's no description of what this labor looked like. Every other piece, the altar, the tabernacle, the menorah, the Ark of the Covenant, the table of showbread, altar of incense, all had descriptions, height, width, materials that it was made out of. What did it look like? Does this have any description at all? None. I don't know why. It's interesting to me that God did not give any other description other than just take the mirrors from the women who were serving at the tent of meeting. Now that brings up another question. What were these women doing serving? There were women serving at the tent entrance. Okay, so let's go back to the word that I picked up at the beginning. What was the word I told you? The Hebrew word. Sava. That's the word that's used to describe the women. What does it mean? So if it's a military concept, or at least has that framework, there could be a number of different possibilities with this. So let me play a little bit of a game with you on this, and then we'll come back to it. Okay? Let me see if I have my words in here. We can do that. All right. How many of you have served in the military? Show of hands. Okay. All right. So regardless if you are in the military or not, I'm going to say a word, and I want you to kind of, and it's okay to do this, you can shout it out, a word associated with it or where it describes it. Okay? So if I said division, what might come to mind militarily? Troops. Okay. Troops. If I said advance. Forward. If I said parachute.
Jump.
Catapult.
Throw.
Throw. What else? Jump. Attack. Fight. Okay. Cavalry. Horseman. HQ. Headquarters. Convoy. A bunch of trucks. Where are they going? Somewhere. Offensive. Attack. Okay. Of these words, how many of them have multiple meanings or we use them in different contexts? All of them. Okay. So the background that I have is I study languages and different things as part of what we do for our therapy and different things. You understand language and how it works. Is I recognize the fact that often words are used but may have different meanings. Okay? But they still relate back to the original meaning, somehow, shape, or form, right? If I say, well, I'm going to headquarters, well, militarily I know that's where the main brass is, but headquarters for my job could be wherever the main location for the business is, right? Okay, it still has that relationship. Whatever the women were doing, they were important. Whether it was militarily or just serving, whatever they were doing, it was important. We don't have instructions about what they were doing. Culturally, maybe it was understood what they were to do. I will tell you, I know they knew what they were not supposed to do, and that's what the other nations were doing when women were serving at the entrances of the pagan temples. How do we know that the nation of Israel didn't do that? Because we have the story of Phineas. Okay, when they tried to do that with the women from the Midianites, Phineas stood up and said, that's not happening, and yeah, they got impaled. Okay? So we know the women weren't doing that. There's two other instances where this is brought up in the scripture, that this area or location is where the women had a conversation or something bad happened. Okay, the first one is in Numbers 27, verses 1 through 5. We don't have to go there, but this is where Zelophehad approached Moses and Aaron and said, my dad died, all my sisters are here, we don't have an inheritance, we're homeless. And I love her defense, and she says to Moses, and by the way, just in case you're thinking, my dad wasn't in with Korah in the rebellion. She says that. Okay, he died in his own sin, is what she says. My dad wasn't, and I can almost imagine a good daughter saying, that's my dad. He wasn't part of that, I promise you. He was a good guy. He died in his own sin. What do we do here? And Moses said, you're right. What do we do here with this? Because you're going to be homeless. So Moses goes before the Lord and says, she's right. Here's what we're going to do. And then he gives the instructions of what to do afterwards. That was the right thing to do. And what a great opportunity to see the wisdom and discernment and the approach that was done the right way. Unfortunately, there's a wrong example of that, and that's later in Samuel, and this is Eli's two sons. If you go to Numbers 22, and that's verses 22 through 25, it also says there were women who were serving at the entrance of the tabernacle, but his two boys were doing things with them that they weren't supposed to. Okay, those are the only instances that we hear of this, of that area. Okay, so my 2 cents on this is this. If it's militarily, that this is kind of how they served, in other words, they had some sort of function in that realm. It reminded me of our trip in 2014. How many of you went to Israel in 2014? Okay, how many of you went with us up to the top where the security booth is? Okay, I think Shoshana took us up there or Raphaela took us up there. And it was amazing. I mean, it took us a while to get up there because a couple of interesting things happened on the way up there. As we were walking up, I think it was a good 45-minute walk to get up there because we were literally wandering around the neighborhood, just wandering around. And as we're going there, I forgot if it was Shoshana's friends or Raphaela's friends, somebody in the community lost their dog. Strawberry was the name, and I don't remember how to say it in Hebrew, but I remember it was Strawberry. So he says, if you see a dog out there, it's probably mine. I think it was a German Shepherd or something. So we're walking, and out of nowhere, this dog comes running, goes straight for Pastor Roger, and almost knocks him down, and just starts licking him. And he goes, I guess this is the dog. And sure enough, it was the dog. And I think she stayed with us the whole way and then came back down and then went back to the owner. And it was just, that was a God thing. It was amazing. Because we looked around and we just see this dog galloping and went right for Pastor Roger. Pastor Roger's sitting on the floor just trying to just pet her, and she's like just loving on him, which is really cool. So while we were there, the women were seated all behind the security cameras. And Shoshana says, you know why the women are here? Because they can see every detail. We rely on them because they watch the cameras and they can see every movement, every detail. They can focus on all the cameras. And because of them, we're able to avert a lot of pitfalls and dangers from the enemy on the other side. And that's true. So Larry, get with it back there. But I think just the reality of just how beautiful that picture is, that the strengths and the responsibility the women had to watch and to be mindful and to see what was going on, their literal eyes were the details of watching. Now, is that the same thing that these women did at the time? I don't know. But I just find it interesting that it's a military term that's used. It's pretty consistent throughout the scriptures, and they were serving there at the doorway to the entrance, and it was important, whatever they were doing, okay? So with that, we'll close for tonight. So just some final thoughts. Betty Jean, go ahead and go to the last one. The first one is, when it comes to God's kingdom, wait for his direction. No matter how long it waits, no matter how impatient it might be, whether we live to see it. And that sometimes is a hard thing, because we want to see it. It may not be for us to see, but our role may be in a position to set it up for that to happen. Wait. Okay? And be mindful, and this is where you have to take every thought captive and literally take it captive, just as Jesus says, because if we're given that responsibility, it's straight from the King. And trust that he's given you enough wisdom and discernment to do that, and just rest with it. All right? Second thing, number 2, be fitted together. Your piece counts no matter which one you are and what you're assigned to do. So thinking of how the tabernacle is fitted together, just as it was in the wilderness, every piece was important, and if one piece was missing, it was incomplete. And then the third one, Jesus as the chief cornerstone directs us and holds us together. And if we can just glean those 3 things from this, we have an eternity that we'll have to enjoy in his presence. We just have to endure this for a time to be prepared for what he's handling us. All right, so with that, I'm going to close with Psalm 18, verse 2, where it says, "The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God and my strength in whom I trust, my shield and my horn of salvation and my stronghold." Shabbat shalom.